Welcome to the Alex Jones Show on this Sunday, January 18th, 2015. I'm David Knight. I'll be your host today. We have some amazing stories that have come out. We've got some new leaks from the Snowden documents that have been reported on exclusively by Der Spiegel, talking about how mass surveillance is only phase 0 for our government's plans. Phase 3, to give you a hint, is domination. If you didn't know that already, we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. But we have another amazing story, another exclusive from the Daily Mail about a screenwriter who was mysteriously killed in 1997 after he'd finished a script, and it was on his way to deliver the script, a script that he said was going to show the real reason behind the Panama invasion. And this is a guy that, as they've done the investigation over the intervening 18 years or so, this is a guy that had intimate connections with the CIA. And of course, he's not the only one. We saw this with the interview that just came out with Sony, how you had the State Department approving the script and saying, yeah, we want you to push that. A Rand Corporation consultant saying, that's going to be very useful because we've got to plant the idea in the minds of people, especially in the minds of South Korea and these DVDs that are going to find their way into North Korea. We need to plant the idea that the only way that we're going to get regime change in North Korea is through assassination. So there's a very deliberate attempt. You can see it in Zero Dark 30. So many different movies. We're going to talk about some of the other movies that have just come out in the last week. Selma, American Sniper. If you've seen those movies, we're going to take your calls. We have a different number on Sunday. That is 877-789-2539 or 877-789-ALEX. So we want to talk about the CIA's influence in Hollywood, of course, how they get rid of journalists like we've seen in many cases. They also get rid of screenwriters. This is an amazing story. I think you'll find the details be very interesting. Also, there's now a Gitmo guard who has gone public with a book. His conscience was bothering him. He said he personally knows of a case where CIA killed prisoners and made it look like suicide. So we're going to talk about that. See, it's not just journalists like Michael Hastings. It's not just screenwriters like this fellow Gary Devore. It's anyone that opposes the government. And when we look at the fact that they want to dominate us through the internet, that is something we should all be very concerned about. We're going to talk about, I think, really the nuclear weapon to use against tyranny. It's a peaceful weapon. It's knowing what your rights are about jury nullification. We're going to see how that is coming to play in the trial of the person accused of running Silk Road. There's a massive jury nullification movement. They're trying to educate people what their rights are because a lot of the people think that you shouldn't go to jail for running a website. Regardless of what people are doing with it, there's a certain number of people, I think they make a good case that you shouldn't go to jail just for running a website. Now, of course, we've got people like Barrett Brown who were sent to jail because they linked to some websites. This is a very dangerous area that we're getting in, especially when we look at the fact that the CIA essentially is abusing their power. The NSA is abusing their power. They're doing whatever they wish, knowing that they're not going to be held legally accountable. And along those lines, there was an interesting story that came out today on Reuters. They're exclusive, saying the White House says that net neutrality legislation is not needed. Let me tell you why the White House doesn't think they need legislation for net neutrality. He says net neutrality rules aren't needed because the FCC has the authority to write them. You see, we don't need Congress to make the laws because Congress is nothing but a useless appendage. They exist presumptively just to run the graft that keeps our federal government running. They can hand out the money to the corporate donors of both the Democrats and Republicans. But as far as legislation, we don't need them because we've got regulatory bureaucracies that will write the laws for you. As I just mentioned in the last segment, there's an exclusive story from the Daily Mail about a screenwriter who mysteriously disappeared in 1997 after he'd finished writing the script for a movie that was going to show, as he put it, the real reason for the Panama invasion. Now, this wasn't a guy who had just come up with a wild theory. This is somebody who had very deep ties with the CIA in Hollywood. And as we've reported, that's something that is pervasive throughout Hollywood. We've seen this with the Sony interview. We've seen it with Zero Dark 30. We've seen John Rizzo, the former chief counsel for the CIA, writing in his autobiography, Company Man, how this is a guy who justified the use of torture, things like waterboarding and so forth, talking about how they had resources in Hollywood that were very eager to be used by the CIA, people that they'd use on both the left and the right of the political spectrum to do what they wanted to do. But here's a case of a screenwriter who I believe, and many people believe, may have seen some things that really did show the real reason for our invasion of Panama. Disappearing, and when he shows up, he's missing both hands. And of course, his script is missing. But now they're starting to put the clues together. And these British documentary filmmakers were visited by a contractor from the Department of Defense, told to drop the project. So I think that's why they went with the Daily Mail. But we're going to talk about what they have discovered. We're also going to talk about some other new movies that have come out that I believe are instruments of propaganda. Not just The Interview from Sony, not just Zero Dark 30 from Sony, but things like American Sniper or Selma. How are they being used to manipulate the public? Is it something that is just the personal point of view of the director, of Clint Eastwood, of Oprah Winfrey, or is it perhaps deeper? So we're going to talk about that. And if you've seen those two movies, give us a call. We want to talk to you. We're going to be taking calls today. The number on Sunday is 877-789-2539. That's 877-789-ALEX. Now, there's also another story that came out, another exclusive, this one from Der Spiegel in Germany. It's a release of some more Snowden documentation that shows that the NSA is saying that phase 0 of what they plan to do was merely the mass surveillance. There's a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3 is domination. So we're going to talk about what's behind that, what they have revealed about that, essentially saying that with domination, their goal is real-time controlled escalation. They say that under the dominate phase, they will control and destroy critical systems and networks at will through pre-positioned access that, of course, has been laid in phase 0. So we're going to talk about that in depth. And finally, the third thing we're going to talk about in depth is jury nullification. This is one of the things that you can do if you understand your rights. If you don't know what your rights are, you don't have any rights. If you don't exercise your rights, you have no rights. So you need to understand what's going on with jury nullification. As they just showed on the screen there, this is all coming to the forefront in a trial that's going on in Manhattan now. They're preparing for this. I believe it starts this Tuesday. But some fully informed jury activists have shown up at the court, and they've been very effective at informing people about Fully Informed Jury Association, the FIJA movement. And the judge is so upset about this that she has threatened to create a secret jury. In other words, busing people in from another area outside of the city, busing them in so they don't see the protesters, keeping them sequestered so that she can deceive them and lie to them about what the law is. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But first, I want to go to this story that came out of the Daily Mail about the screenwriter who disappeared. And we should all be very concerned when we see our government assassinating people who are providing information to the public. People, journalists like Michael Hastings, or this screenwriter who essentially had had enough and wanted to come out with the information that he thought was incredibly criminal. So when we see this type of thing happen, and this has a lot of very suspicious circumstances with it, just like the Michael Hastings case. To give you an overview of this screenwriter, Gary Devore, had written movies like Raw Deal and Time Cop. Raw Deal was a Schwarzenegger movie. There's pictures in this article of him hanging out with a lot of people in Hollywood. Kurt Russell, Arnold Schwarzenegger, many action film stars. They say his body was found after it disappeared a year later in a California aqueduct. But there was some strange circumstances about this. Not only were both of his hands missing from the car that he was driving, right? His script was never found. Now they say that even a former White House official has confirmed that he was working with the CIA in Panama. Now, he was on his way at the time, they point out, to deliver a film script, and it was going to give the real reason that we invaded Panama, according to him. The interesting thing was how the car wound up. It wound up going the wrong way for the way that he should be driving. So some people said, well, perhaps he got off to take a break and he got confused and got on the wrong side of the road and then ran into the aqueduct. The problem is that he would have had to have driven 2 miles going the wrong way There were no lights on this highway, yet when they found the car, the headlights were turned off. So he was driving the wrong way, going that way for 2 miles. And of course, this is a guy who had previously been a long-distance truck driver. They say that he never wore his seatbelt. He never wore his, never carried his wallet in his back pocket, as was something that he'd started doing as a long-distance truck driver. But both of those things were there. So he was seatbelted in, and he had his wallet in his back pocket. But of course, the amazing thing is that he had no hands. He was driving apparently with no hands. They say that the research team that was putting this together was warned to drop the investigation by Department of Defense contractor. They've also secured testimony from the coroner that reveals that human hands that they later found in the car, disconnected, were in fact around 200 years old. Now, here's the amazing thing. Now, these documentary producers, I can understand that they're scared if they have gone through and they have looked to see what's behind this. They see that it's an incredible story, nothing believable about the circumstances of his death. And so then they're warned by a Department of Defense contractor, and they say, someone in authority lied or made a shocking error. Shocking error? They say there could be an innocent explanation for the hands, but it's as extraordinary as a conspiracy theory, and it's very suspicious. You don't say. You think there's an innocent explanation for somebody being found dead without his hands behind the wheels of a car? See, that's what bothers me about so much of this stuff. People can never bring themselves to question the official story, no matter how implausible it is. And if there are things that point to a government agency being involved in criminal actions, we're never allowed to go there. We have to kind of point to those things and say, well, gee, that's kind of suspicious, but maybe there's a plausible explanation for that.
2015 is almost here, and with it comes those New Year's resolutions to finally transform your body the way you want it. There's a reason over 88% of New Year's resolutions fail. Make this year different by equipping yourself with Oxy Powder, the next level in cleansing the body naturally. Using super oxygenation, Oxy Powder, available through InfoWarsLife.com, gently cleanses the body while you sleep with easy capsules. Tens of thousands of individuals have used Oxy Powder to cleanse their bodies and aid in their transformations. Even InfoWars Nightly News Director Rob Dew has been using Oxy Powder with incredible success.
Took it that first day, and then I took it for 6 more days after that. 12 pounds melted off in about a week. I'd say a week, 7 days.
2015 can be different. Diet and exercise are important, but a lot of us have already tried that. Oxy Powder flushes it out. Secure your Oxy Powder at InfoWarsLife.com. That's InfoWarsLife.com or 888-253-3139.
I've been talking about the nexus of the CIA and Hollywood. That's going to be the topic we're going to explore. I'd like to take your calls if you've seen American Sniper or Selma, because those are two movies that I think are going to have a big effect on the way people view war, the way they view race relations here in America. And we've seen over and over again that Hollywood has an agenda that in many times is being informed and run by the CIA. In this particular case that we've been talking about, an exclusive from the Daily Mail, talking about a screenwriter who disappeared back in 1997. He was going to make his directorial debut. This is someone who had written movies like Dogs of War, Raw Deal, Time Cop, movies back in the 80s and 90s. He was a successful screenwriter in Hollywood, but he had another aspect to his life, and that was he was very closely linked with the CIA. And as he disappeared and was gone for about a year, when he surfaced, when they found his body, they found that there were a lot of things that were unusual about the way he died. They found him in a Los Angeles aqueduct, his car submerged. Now, to get there, he would have had to have been driving the wrong way for a couple of miles at night when there were no lights, with his lights turned off. His lights were turned off inside the car. They found him in a way that he did not drive. He was a long-distance truck driver. He never drove with a seatbelt, with his wallet in his back pocket. Both of those things were there. That was uncharacteristic. And of course, the script that he had just finished and was coming back with, that was missing as well. But then the most amazing thing was that he apparently had been driving with no hands. Now, what he said he was working on was a movie that was going to show the real reason that we invaded Panama. And according to him, and according to the movie that he was going to direct, The Big Steal, it was done to cover up something of a bank robbery. Yeah, that's right, a bank robbery. Why would the American government stage an invasion to essentially do a bank robbery? Well, they didn't need the money. What they needed were the blackmail tapes that Noriega has. He says it sounds like the Pentagon planned the bank robbery and the war was just a diversion. His research for the end product included an article from London's now defunct Sunday correspondent that alleged that dictator General Manuel Noriega had compiled a stash of sex tapes that featured top-ranking U.S. officials. Noriega, it says, was running honey traps, inviting diplomats and other government officials to his home, get them filled with drugs and alcohol, and then filming their antics. And after years of research, Dr. Alford, who is doing the film, says that this may have implied that the invasion was nothing more than a diversion that would allow the U.S. into Panama to steal back incriminating photos of senior U.S. officials that Noriega was blackmailing them with. Does that sound credible? It sounds credible to me. We've had a lot of accusations of that type of thing, not only from about CIA agents, but also about President George H.W. Bush as well. Now, the interesting thing about this is, according to his widow, she said that he got a lot of phone calls from the CIA, and when they first got married, he says, I'm going to be getting a lot of these phone calls, but don't pay any attention to them. She said in the month before he disappeared, he was getting them on a very frequent basis. And then after the guy disappeared, within a week, he was visited by not only the CIA, but the FBI, the NSA, and the Department of Defense. Now, that's kind of strange, isn't it, that you would get visitations from all of those types of people. But she said that she would find out that he would be traveling with the CIA on many of these trips that he was taking. A lot of times he would say that he was just going to research shooting locations, but she said she's found out that he wasn't with the crews that he said he was. And it's been substantiated now by people who were in the Bush White House that, yes, he was in fact traveling not only with the CIA on special ops, but also going to Panama. This is an amazing story. But it's not something that we haven't seen before. When we saw the Michael Hastings car crash, immediately there were many things about the crash itself that didn't add up. And then as time went by, you start seeing all of these other things that are happening as part of the backstory. And of course, we know that the government is perfectly capable of assassinating people. As a matter of fact, we just saw that with the Sony interview, we just saw that we had the Rand Corporation consultant as well as the State Department signing off on this quote-unquote comedy that was really a piece of propaganda, saying, yeah, it's kind of over the top the way that you kill the North Korean leader, but I think we need to plant that idea in people's minds. The sooner the better. They need to understand that we need regime change, and the only way that we're going to get it is with assassination. And, of course, all the DVDs that are going to find their way into South Korea are eventually going to start filtering into the North, so people can get that idea as well. See, we're putting up with a criminal element in our government that basically doesn't believe it has any restrictions on itself. What a perfect way to control everything. If you can create a secret organization within a very powerful government and say that, well, because of state security, we can't tell you anything that we're going to do. If that didn't corrupt the people in and of itself, criminals could easily infiltrate that and take that organization over. That's why we can't have a secret government. And of course, everything the government does in every aspect now has become secret. Our lives are to be an open book to the federal government, but nothing that they do, whether it's the CIA or somebody that is just running an airport, nothing that they do is available for us to see what they're doing. See, it's completely the other way. To underscore that, these documents that came out from Der Spiegel, some new Snowden documents, point out that the NSA is developing cyber weapons with an attacker mindset for domination in the digital war. They say that mass surveillance was apparently just the beginning. The agency is now preparing for future wars in cyberspace in which control over the internet and rival networks will be the key to victory. And these are some new Snowden documents that were released to the German paper Der Spiegel. They say mass surveillance of the NSA was labeled in these documents as Phase 0 in America's digital war strategy, intended to detect vulnerabilities in enemy systems so that, quote, stealthy implants could infiltrate the systems and allow, quote, permanent access. Phase 3 is labeled Dominate, where the agency will control and destroy critical systems and networks with pre-positioned access that they did in Phase 0 and use real-time escalation. So this is what they've got in store for us as they go on and point out in the article from Der Spiegel. They talk about them as being the D weapons. Of course, we usually talk about NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical. In Germany, they're calling it the atomic, biological, and chemical. So that's ABC, and then D is digital. I guess if we go to E, I guess that would be environmental weapons, like climate control, something like that. At that point, we are truly effed, I guess. But A, B, C, and now D weapons, where they're coming after everything we do. They say it's no coincidence that the director of the NSA also serves as the head of Cyber Command. And they point out that intelligence agencies have adopted plausible deniability so that they can do all this stuff without ever being caught.
In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. DNA Force from InfoWars Life.